You also go to you go to a group on Sunday mornings. That's good. It's a lot of kind of younger families and,
Okay.
there's tons of good stuff.
Alright, so we're back in Exodus. Summer's over. And the plan for this group is going to be, we're going to do the first half of Exodus, which is kind of getting us up to the 10 Commandments.
Mm.
So they're going to get out of Egypt, they're going to go to the wilderness, and then get to Sinai, get the law. The rest of Exodus is like the tabernacle.
Mm.
A lot of instructions and things like that. We're not going to study that in depth, so we'll move on. When we finish the 20 so chapters in Exodus, probably going to move into the New Testament and do Mark next. But so one of the things I wanted to start off with is a lot of this is for people listening online that are studying, pastors, teachers that are trying to find resources online, because I've been studying Exodus for a few months using a lot of online resources. Just wanted to point out a few things. So whenever we're studying, we want to get academic help from academic sources. So we want to make sure we're getting answers to our academic questions from people and sources that have academic credentials, that have access to primary sources, which means original language documents, inscriptions, things like that. So we're talking about people that have PhDs in Egyptology, in the ancient Near East, in Israel, ancient Israel, things like that. The problem with these people is most of them, up until recently, are in the academy. They're in colleges, seminaries, universities. They're not accessible. They write books, they write commentaries, but are you going to spend $50 on a commentary just because you're studying a book of the Bible? Probably not. And so for years and years and years, a lot of the access to good information was locked up in the ivory tower and of the academy. So I did want to mention, because we're studying Exodus, we'll look at, talk about who some of the top Exodus scholars are, but also online who the top experts are that are available online. So start off with Doug Stewart. So Doug Stewart was professor of Old Testament at Gordon Conwell for like 40-some years. And he was my pastor for a couple of years when I was there, and very good teacher, but his magnum opus is his Exodus commentary in the New American Commentary set, which looks like this. And the church has a full copy of this. They have the whole thing. It's about 3 feet long. When you walk in the library, you'll see New American Commentary like this. So if you're studying a book of the Bible for a class or whatever, you're teaching, you can go in there and take this out. She'll let you have it 2-3 weeks at a time. You don't have to buy it. If you want to give Doug Stewart $38, you can buy it. But really the publisher, he probably gets about 5. But he's 83 now. He doesn't need your money anymore. So he's well known for How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth. That's the one you would probably know him for. Doug Stewart, Gordon Fee, How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth. Over 1 million copies sold. It's in every bookstore in the world. Not very common. It's been translated into like 30-something languages. But he generally didn't write a lot of stuff for the general public. He wrote a lot of academic stuff. But he is an Exodus scholar, has a great commentary in the New American Commentary set. So there are a lot of other commentaries on Exodus. Dwayne Garrett is another mention. He's also Gordon Conwell, was a Gordon Conwell professor. I think he's at Southern Seminary now. Michael Heiser. When the internet kind of came along, there were a few scholars that jumped in, and they started putting their stuff out there to the public. So one of them was Dr. Michael Heiser. He started creating websites, blogs, and then eventually YouTube came out. And he started putting his seminars on YouTube, and then eventually they started clipping them up and creating clips and putting thumbnails and getting. So there's no more prolific scholar on YouTube than Michael Heiser. If you want to ask a question, you could probably type in Heiser and a verse of the Bible or a book of the Bible, and you will find stuff. He does specialize in Old Testament, but he does both Old and New. He's known for his book, The Unseen Realm. The lay version is called Supernatural. So he focuses on the spiritual beings of the Bible, but he is also a scholar. Naked Bible Podcast is his podcast, which you can get on any of the podcasting, but also on YouTube. So he's a really good resource. He's been out there publicly for 15 plus years, and he did pass away a couple years ago, but his stuff is still being recycled and clipped and put out there. He has a lot of stuff out there. So in Exodus, he also has an Exodus commentary series. So he's a good one to study. Another one is Dr. Carmen Imes. So she is associate professor of Old Testament at Biola in California. There's not a lot of female Old Testament scholars, but she is one of them. She's been studying Exodus for over 15 years. She has the Baker Exegetical Commentary coming out this year, next year, for Exodus. So she has one of the newest commentaries coming out. So she's actively writing a commentary. She started 3 years ago Torah Tuesdays, which is a YouTube channel of hers where she does like under 10-minute commentary clips, working her way through Exodus and other topics as well. So that's one that I highly recommend. If you're studying Exodus, you don't have access to a lot of resources, you want something you can just put on, listen to in your car, Torah Tuesday, Dr. Imes. Very good. And another one is the Bible Project. Obviously, most people know it, but the Bible Project is unique in that it is run by PhDs. Tim Mackey is a legitimate PhD. But whenever they're going to make a video, they always hire somebody that's a scholar in that video, in that topic. So they'll bring in a consultant, specializes in that. They write their script, they put it together, if they're doing a series or whatever. They have top-notch stuff. Like when they did Spiritual Beings of the Bible, Michael Heiser was brought in for those. So they do have Exodus stuff, but they also have what's called their classes. So Bible Project classes, and their Exodus class is Dr. Imes. You see the connection there. So very good and very free. You don't have to pay anybody $40. You just go online, sign up, you get it for free. And another mention, I'm going to mention Ancient Egypt in the Bible. So that's Dr. David Falk. He's an Egyptologist, but a Bible scholar as well, conservative, maximalist, biblical maximalist. Very good. I don't agree with everything he says, but Egyptology is a very difficult subject because it's 3,000 years of history to study and know. It's a lot, and there's very few of them. And you'll see more and more of them online now, especially women. Women have kind of taken over Egyptology, tend to be favored in the universities now. You'll see now on YouTube a lot of female Egyptologists that are giving commentary and clips and whatnot. But he's a good one. Highly recommend him. If you have Exodus questions, he has tons of stuff on Exodus. So that's getting academic help from academic sources. If you're looking online, how do I study? Where do I study? You don't have access to a library, digitally or otherwise. YouTube has everything now. And honestly, I can pretty much study just about anything using primarily just YouTube now because there's so much content out there now. That said, make sure that the people you're watching, listening to they have credentials. They're not just saying crazy random things or just coming up with their own interpretations out of thin air. It's got to be based on something, So it's just a little talk on that. So we're in the middle of the plagues. We've already talked about the first few. So we looked at the plague of blood and lice and frogs, swarms, and now we're on chapter 9. So we're getting into the plague of the cattle. So I'm going to go ahead and read that. Get a volunteer there for 9:1-7.
I don't know. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh and say to him, 'This is what the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, says. Let my people go, so that they may worship me. If you refuse to let them go and continue to hold them back, the hand of the Lord will bring a terrible plague on your livestock in the field, and on your horses and donkeys and camels, and on your cattle and sheep and goats. But the Lord will make a distinction between the livestock of Israel and that of Egypt, so that no animal belonging to the Israelites will die. The Lord set a time and said, tomorrow the Lord will do this in the land. And the next day the Lord did it. All the livestock of the Egyptians died, but not one animal belonging to the Israelites died. Pharaoh sent men to investigate and found that not even one of the animals of the Israelites had died. Yet his heart was unyielding, and he would not let the people go.
Okay. So we've said in the past that the word plague, the 10 plagues of Egypt, is probably a bad term for what's happening here. But this is the one time where the word plague, devar, is used to describe what's happening here. So this actually is what the Hebrew calls a plague. So in verse 3, that's it. The rest of them are more kind of signs. They're not really plagues. They're not sickness or disease per se. The next one coming up was boils, which you could call that a plague, but we have like hail, and that's not a plague. You got the river turning to blood, definitely not a plague. But we prefer the term like signs and wonders is really a better term to describe the 10 plagues, and we've said that it's not really the 10 plagues, it's more like the 12 signs. We have the final sign, which is going to be the Red Sea closing, opening and closing. And we have the initial sign of the staff turning to a serpent, swallowing up the staffs of the Egyptian magicians. So, what are the purpose of these plagues, signs, wonders? We've discussed it a little bit, but like why? Like what's God doing here? Why all this? Why kill all these animals?
Well, this one in particular, or all of them? In all of them, he's showing, right,
Yeah,
that
all
he
of them.
is supreme over everything. That he is
Over everything, meaning what?
the one true God over all creation, over Egypt, over all the land, over these gods that the Egyptians have worshipped, and so he's showing that he is in control, they are not in control, and showing that Pharaoh is not in control.
So he's the God of gods. And so we've said, like, this is a polemic, which means he's attacking the gods of Egypt. So a lot of these are aimed directly at, if not all of them, are aimed directly at the gods of Egypt. So why does the Nile turn to blood? Well, several gods in Egypt that are associated with the Nile. So Yahweh showing control and dominance over that shows that those gods have no real power. That the God of Hebrews has supreme power over all. And, the concept of gods and deities and all that, Scripture does mention that there are principalities and powers. There are beings that are put over the nations, right? Deuteronomy 32 and all these things. So it's not that the gods of Egypt aren't real deities that God has given authority and power to. They are. But what he's showing here is that Yahweh has control over all the gods. That he's the one that they need to fear. He's the one they need to obey. And so through all these plagues, he's literally just slapping down and showing dominance. So this one here, the cattle, there are several gods in Egypt that are portrayed as cattle, portrayed as cows, that are thought to be protectors of cattle, livestock. They have lots of different gods like this. It's not always just one god in particular, it could be several. And keep in mind, like when you talk about Egyptian religion, you're talking about many different pagan cults, many different gods, many different regions and places. So it's not just one particular, it's many. And we're talking about lots of history. We know that Egypt was taken over by the Canaanites at one point. When they came down, well, guess what? They started worshiping and honoring Baal. So Baal became a part of their worship and understanding at one point because of that. Because of the rulers that gave honor and temples and sacrifices to the gods that they knew. So it's not very monolithic. It's very, the pagan world is very lots of different things going on, lots of different beliefs and understandings about who's in control of this or that, who controls the weather, who controls fertility. People honor and worship different gods. So Yahweh makes sure to slap down most or all of them through all these different plagues affecting different natural things that are normally attributed to gods or goddesses. So we also see the writer is giving us and showing us this is like a decreation. We said that Exodus is a creation account of the nation of Israel. So the plagues is kind of like it's written in a way that we see like decreation. So that's one aspect of it. The decreation of Egypt as a nation, breaking down all these things, destroying, causing chaos. And we're going to have many purpose statements in here. We're going to see a couple today and why God is doing this. He's doing it to punish the Egyptians for mistreating his people, his firstborn. He's going to do it to show power, dominance. He's going to do it so that the other nations around Egypt are going to fear Yahweh because of what he did to Egypt. And we're going to see that with Jericho. They're going to hear about what Yahweh did to Egypt. And they're so terrified that Rahab is going to say, I want to be with you. Can we make that happen? Many of the Egyptians are going to leave Egypt. They're going to obey Yahweh. We're going to see that here in this passage. When, with the hail, Moses is going to say, if you don't want your cattle and your people to get hurt, you might want to bring them inside. And many of Pharaoh's own officials are going to heed that warning. And when Egypt, when Exodus happens and the Hebrews go out, they're going to take many Egyptians with them. They're going to go. They're going to honor Yahweh. You're going to see how powerful Yahweh is. They say, we don't need this. We don't need Pharaoh and his gods. We're going with these guys. So God is showing his power, punishing, but several things going on here. So, and again, you're going to see the hardening of the heart. And it always, in English, they tend to translate it to hardened. But if you look in your Bibles, if this is the New American Standard, they're going to give you little notes. It's going to tell you exactly what word is there. So, literally heavy. So, verse 7, where it says hardened, it's actually the word heavy heart. Pharaoh had heavy heart. And we said what heavy heart means is it means a guilty or a wicked heart. Because of their belief about how when you die, from the Book of the Dead we know, when you die your heart gets weighed against a feather. If you have heavy heart, that means you're guilty or wicked before the gods. And that's their idea. So for Pharaoh to have heavy heart means he's guilty or wicked. But it also says that Yahweh hardened Pharaoh's heart. And when it usually, except for one occasion, which we're going to see this week, it's usually the word hazak, which means strengthened. It says Yahweh strengthened Pharaoh's heart, made it more resolved to be the way it is, which is hardened. So we're going to move through and get to that. So this plague, the cattle die. Not just, it's horses, donkeys, camels, herds, flocks. Some people, when they see that camels there, and this is kind of an older view, but they'll say that this is one example of why the Bible was written late, because up until about almost 2000, in the mid-90s to 2000, they really hadn't discovered any camel bones in ancient Egypt. And so they said, well, camels weren't domesticated in Egypt until much later. So Exodus must have been written much later because it's showing camels in Egypt. And this was like a common argument against the early dates of Exodus, or maybe Mosaic authorship or early Israel authorship. But for the last 20 some years, it's been proven and shown that yes, indeed there were camels. They were rare. They were mainly used for transport through the deserts from Bedouins and people like the Midianites. They had camel, caravans that would go through these deserts. They needed them. So camels are mentioned. And this would have been an exotic animal in Egypt, but they were there. There is evidence of domestication of camels early. We do have it now, so it's a kind of a moot argument today.
Mm-hmm. A lot of the times with livestock, it talked about in Abraham time, but it was talking about because they had these things of prosperity, and so God is kind of taken after the prosperity of Egypt. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, and that's another thing. What is up until now, most of these signs, plays have been annoying. They had to dig for water because the water in the Nile was blood. They still got water. They had frogs everywhere. The frogs are harmless. They're just annoying. They stunk. It says it stank. The Nile stank. The frogs stank when they died. The lice. Yeah, lice are bad, but they're not they're not going to kill you. But they did create a scenario where everybody was ritually unclean because lice in Egypt was considered an unclean thing if you had lice. That's why all the priests in Egypt shaved their entire bodies every few days, so they could be ritually clean and not have lice. Assuming that the third plague was indeed lice. Things like that. Up until now, it's just annoyances. It's nothing really super serious. But now, God is literally killing. And there's hyperbole here for sure. It's not all. But if it is all, that's another issue is, are we dealing with hyperbole? Is this all the animals that are in the field, out, versus the animals that are kept inside? There are different views on this. Because we're going to see animals later with hail. Where did those animals come from? Did they buy them from the Israelites? Right, because the Israelites are protected. Did they send and get more animals? We tend to think that the plagues were very close because of the way we read it. They're actually spread out quite a bit. They're spread out over a period of months, probably 6 months plus. Because we know that we're going to get some notes in here about the cycles of...
all 10 happened within a 6 month period?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, it's spread out over time. So
10 days.
Yeah, it didn't all happen. It's not the Prince of Egypt movie. Spread out. And we know that because of the things that are mentioned, the harvests of different wheats and barleys. We know they happen at different times. So it's kind of like Moses was around, told Pharaoh, send my people away, let us go. And Pharaoh said, no, I'm not going to do that. Moses said, okay, well, now it's going to turn to blood. Pharaoh says, okay, I'm still not going to let you go. My magician's going to do that. And then maybe a period of some weeks go by, and God tells Moses to go back. And then another one comes, and another one comes. So it's like that. So Pharaoh has time to think about it. The Egyptians have time to recover, think about it. But now we're starting to get into serious things. They're starting to affect the economy of Egypt. Yeah, the worship of Egypt was affected by those swarms and those lice. But now we're talking about animals, food, the ability to do work, donkeys, camels, beasts of burden, horses are affecting the army now. The ability that, chariot armies were big at this time. So, starting to get more serious in what's happening. Alright, so let's read the next plague there. Plague of boils. Get a reader for that. It's going to be 8 to 17.
Then the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, take handfuls of soot from the kiln, and let Moses throw it in the air in the sight of Pharaoh. It shall become fine dust all over the land of Egypt. and shall cause festering boils on humans and animals throughout the whole land of Egypt. So they took soot from the kiln and stood before Pharaoh, and Moses threw it in the air, and it caused festering boils on humans and animals. The magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils, for the boils afflicted the magicians as well as all the Egyptians. But the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, and he would not listen to them, just as the Lord had spoken to Moses. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Rise up early in the morning and present yourself before Pharaoh, and say to him, 'Thus saith the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, let my people go, so that they may worship me. For this time I will send all of my plagues upon you yourself, and upon your officials, and upon your people, so that you may know that there is no one like me in all the earth. For by now I could have stretched out my hand and struck you and your people with pestilence, and you would have been cut off from the earth. But this is why I have let you live, to show you my power, and to make my name resound through all the earth."
All right. So we end here with the purpose statement. For this reason, I've allowed you to remain in order to show you my power and to proclaim my name throughout all the earth. So again, power and getting Yahweh's name out here. So we got a plague of boils here. Nobody really knows what this is exactly, but the idea is some kind of a skin problem. It's bad enough and affects everyone in a very negative way here. I would definitely be scared if boils started breaking out on everybody around me. Definitely sounds like zombie apocalypse type stuff. Soot from a kiln. We know that the Egyptians were making a lot of bricks, and they forced everybody to do work, but they also were putting heavy burdens on the Israelites, or at this time the Hebrews, to make a certain amount of these bricks. Some of them were sun-dried, a lot of them were kiln-dried too, kiln-fired. We would particularly use those for the outer layers of monuments and projects that they weren't going to use stone on. It holds up a lot better. We face a lot of our buildings with fired brick because it's rock solid. So, perhaps this is pointing to the labor of the Israelites a little bit here, taking the soot from the kilns that they work in, throwing it up, and build brick out. Someone suggested that. Again, we have a hardening, and the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. This is going to be Hazak. This is the strengthening. The Lord strengthened Pharaoh's resolve to be the way that he's going to be here. And verse 15, put forth my hand. This is the outstretched hand. See lots of depictions of Pharaoh holding a staff with his arm outstretched. This is a power position. So the Lord with his outstretched, we see that a lot in Scripture. The outstretched hand or arm of God. This is something this is like an Egyptianism that they're very familiar with. And so for Yahweh to put forth his hand and strike, this is basically saying that he's, like Pharaoh. He has this authority. And so he's striking them with pestilence. He's saying, I could have killed you. If I wanted to, I could have killed you all by now, but I didn't do that. And basically, I'm doing all of these things to make my name known and to show that I have power over everything. Not just the weather, not just the Nile, not just disease, everything. You're going to get the picture. It seems like Pharaoh's viziers and people that are in high authority, the magicians, which are counselors that have probably supernatural powers. That's why they're there. We're going to see as we read, they're ready. They're convinced. They're like, don't you see that we're ruined? Eventually, is what they're going to say. Mm-hmm. And
that's what they said in the Nash, man. This is the finger of God. Like, this is something else.
Yeah, we
right?
can't
We
do
can't-
this. This
yeah.
is like a God thing.
Uh,
Yeah. But now they're affected by these things. They're going to come to Pharaoh and just basically say, "Will you let these people go already? Like, just be obedient to this God because he's ruined us. We have no food. We have no animals." So we're going to see some more stuff here. Now, the plague of hail is next, but it's a very long passage. So rather than read it all, let's just say that God is going to come in a storm here, and we could think of this as a storm theophany, which is one of the ways that God reveals himself to humanity many times. We see it from the beginning of creation, when Adam and Eve get judged in the garden. He comes in a storm. When he appears to Elijah on the mountain, comes in a storm. He sees them on Sinai, meets them on Sinai, storm, thunder, lightning, flashing, fire, smoke, earthquake. This is the kind of thing. So we're going to have a very serious storm. We're going to have hail so big that it's going to kill people. It's going to destroy all the fields and the crops that are up at the time. It's not going to wipe them all out because other crops that are planted that are coming up later or will be soon planted. It's going to wipe out certain crops. I think this one wipes out the barley, which is you can eat barley, but most of the time they would use barley to make beer. And beer for them was like a staple drink. So, no more beer. Very sad. But for them it was more like, no more beverages. Now we got problems. And, mead and beer and things were used as a substitute for water when water had issues with it. It's a safe thing to drink. It doesn't necessarily get you drunk, or too drunk. But you could use it, in theory. And we're going to see that Pharaoh's going to send for Moses and Aaron. There's hail going. And Moses and Aaron are able to walk around. So we see, and we're going to see that Moses is going to go out into the city, verse 33, and spreads out his hands to the Lord, and the thunder and the hail cease, and the rain no longer pour on the earth. So miraculously, Moses and Aaron are able to move around. The Israelites are unaffected by this. Their land in Goshen is unaffected by the hail. It's just in the land of Egypt. Moses and Aaron are able to go to Pharaoh, walk around, everything's good with them. They're protected while everything else is dying. So we see like supernatural protection here. And again, Pharaoh's heart was hardened. This is going to be Hazak, 35. And it's going to be strengthened. So this is strong. Yeah, this is Hazak. So Pharaoh's heart was hardened again. Is the wording there, 35. So we have hail. When it says hail with fire from heaven in the Bible is referring primarily to lightning. It's that idea. Thunder and lightning. You'll see it a lot. When Elijah calls down fire from heaven, it's lightning to consume the sacrifice. Alright, so the plague of locusts is even longer. Getting into these are more serious and devastating plagues. Why don't we go ahead and time we got? Why don't we get a reader for 10. Let's read the first 11 verses now.
Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go into Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the heart of his servants, that I may show these signs of mine among them, and that you may tell in the hearing of your son and of your grandson how I have dealt harshly with the Egyptians, and what signs I have done among them, that you may know that I am the Lord." So Moses and Aaron went into Pharaoh and said to him, "Thus says the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, how long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go, that they may serve me. For if you refuse to let my people go, behold, tomorrow I will bring locusts into your country, and they shall cover the face of the land, so that no one can see the land. And they shall eat what is left to you after the hail, and they shall eat every tree of yours that grows in the field, and they shall fill your houses and the houses of all your servants and of all the Egyptians, as neither your fathers nor your grandfathers have seen, from the day they came on earth to this day. Then he turned and went out from Pharaoh. Then Pharaoh's servants said to him, How long shall this man be a snare to us? Let the men go, that they may serve the Lord their God. Do you not yet understand that Egypt is ruined? So Moses and Aaron were brought back to Pharaoh, and he said to them, Go, serve the Lord your God. But which ones are to go? Moses said, We will go with our young and our old. We will go with our sons and daughters, and with our flocks and herds, and we must hold a feast to the Lord. But he said to them, The Lord be with you, if ever I let you and your little ones go. Look, you have some evil purpose in mind. No, go, the men among you, and serve the Lord, for that is what you are asking. And they were driven out from Pharaoh's presence.
Okay. So we see here Pharaoh is starting to, at the direction of his magicians and counselors, they're saying, look, let the guys go. We're ruined here. So Pharaoh's kind of starting to bargain here, saying, all right, who's going to go here if we let you go? And his servants are suggesting he lets the men go. They assume that's all that needs to be done, because in their society, the men are really the ones doing worship and whatnot. Women stay at home with the kids, and they keep things very separate. Israelite worship, the women are welcome, but they're not mandated to be a part. And that's for practical reasons. Women are home, they're taking care of kids, elderly parents, they're giving birth, they're being pregnant, and all the things that women have to deal with. But Yahweh does include them in worship. In fact, when he sets up the tabernacle and the temple, there is a place for them as well. But here, basically, Pharaoh says, well, why don't you guys go out into the wilderness and just leave women and kids here, and trying to make deals here. Because he knows, I think everybody here knows that this is Moses is saying, let my people go, send us away. He understands that they're going to be leaving. This isn't just a 3-day journey. They want to take everything and go. And so they know what's going on, but Moses and Aaron keep just saying, well, we need to go into the wilderness. We got to bring everything with us, everybody, even the cattle. But Pharaoh doesn't want that, because Pharaoh doesn't want to give up a free labor force of, all these people, however many there are. He wants to make sure that he keeps them there so that they can keep making his bricks and doing work for him and paying taxes and all the things that they're doing for him, building up his kingdom, his cities. He doesn't want to let go. And so he's trying to make deals here and see if he can, initially he says, well, why don't you guys just worship in Egypt here? And Moses says, no, that's not going to work, because Egyptians, they're going to be offended by our sacrifices. It'll be abomination. We have to go in the wilderness. Now he's talking about the men going. Eventually he's going to say, well, you can take the kids and everybody, but leave the livestock. And, we're going to see this kind of bargaining going back and forth. Again, we see the purpose statement here at the beginning in verse 2. And it says here, in verse 1 and 2, the Lord said to Moses, go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart. By the way, this is the first time we've seen, this is the one example where it says Yahweh, is that I have hardened. Yahweh has made heavy. Usually when it's made heavy, it's usually Pharaoh's making his own heart heavy. So this is the one example. And it's at the beginning before the plague is announced. Usually we see this at the end, after the plague happens, that Pharaoh hardens his heart and doesn't let the people go. This is kind of like a telescoping here, the one exception to the rule, but it's kind of telescoping that in the end, God's going to harden his heart. And the heart of his servants, that I may perform these signs of mine among them, and that you may tell in the hearing of your son and your grandson how I made a mockery of the Egyptians, and how I performed my signs among them, that you may know that I am the Lord. So this passage is kind of telling the people of Israel, I'm doing this for the sake of generations to come that are not going to see these miracles and signs. I'm doing this so that you can tell them about what I did and that they can believe. So, obviously the practical thing is here. When we came to Christ, we might have had an experience with him. We might have radically changed our lives, walked away from the lifestyle of whatever we were into. But then we raised kids that never experienced that, never had to walk away from that lifestyle. They were raised in church, never saw problems, they never had issues. How do you pass on to them the experience? I can share with them my experience. Like, look, I was headed for hell. I was going this direction, and God took me, shook me, moved me over here. But they're not necessarily going to understand it. So this is kind of the same idea. So they can say to their children and their grandchildren, we were slaves in Egypt, bound, we were used, abused. They killed our children. They did all these things to us. But God brought us out by all these magical, supernatural things. And so that's the idea, is passing on a legacy. And it's something that we have to do today as well. We have to pass on a legacy. We might not be able to say to them, our kids may never be able to see deliverance the way that we had to see it. But we can still pass it on and share the stories. And that's kind of the same idea here.
Could possibly the reason why they also said that the reason I'm showing you this power is because God in his omniscience knew that they were going to murmur and complain, and not a single one of them is going to be going to the promised land. So it's like when he said their kids and their grandkids, this is the kids and the grandkids that could be the one fighting Jericho and AI and all this other stuff and taking over the promised land.
Yeah, we're going to see like a shift here in Exodus, whereas like Pharaoh is the main problem person that's fighting against God, being disobedient. And Pharaoh's going to be left in the dust. And remember, keep in mind, like Pharaoh is never named. Even his own daughters before were never named. The focus was not on who that individual was. It's just focusing on the authority of the leader, of the emperor, if you will, the leader. And eventually that focus is going to shift now. When they get in the wilderness, it's going to be the people that are going to be the opposition, that are going to be the disobedient, that God's going to have to deal with. So right now we have Pharaoh and Moses and Aaron and God are the main characters. Eventually it's going to shift to God and the people that are going to murmur and complain.
I also always thought this was interesting, but they keep going back to Pharaoh and says, let my people go.
Mm-hmm.
They don't just do it. They still respect the authority that Pharaoh has over them. It says, so like, I guess the thing that I'm kind of getting at is like, people complain about government or this or that or their employer. It says, we have to respect the position of them. It says, even if God tells us that this is going to happen, we don't know the timing of it. And it's like, God will deliver you. It says, but you still have to respect that position that person has over your life.
Mm-hmm. Oh, very true. Alright, so he tells them there's going to be a plague of locusts. The locusts are going to blow in with the east wind. Usually the east wind is like a negative thing. And it says east wind in scripture. It's a negative situation here. Look through scripture. So the east wind brings in all these locusts. They cover the face of the earth and destroy everything, eat everything that the hail didn't destroy. and I believe they take out the wheat and the emmer. So obviously the wheat is going to be their primary source of bread, and locusts are going to strip it all. So now they're not going to have a season's worth of food, which is a problem. Might not be a completely devastating problem if they stored up food, but it's going to be an issue. They might have to reach out to other kingdoms and territories, do some trade to get the amount of food they need to feed 3 million people. So remember, all the agriculture pretty much is in that Nile Delta there in Egypt. If that area is affected by a bad drought or a bad situation, it's a big problem for millions of people. So it's a problem. Egypt historically is usually the place people go when they need food, because it's a very reliable flooding of the delta. They store up food, they have food. We see the Canaanites constantly going down to Egypt to get food. They have it in abundance. That's really the source of their power, is that they have that delta region flooded and very fertile. Alright, so let's get to our last sign for today. This is the darkness. I'll go ahead and read it. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand toward the sky, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, even a darkness which may be felt." So Moses stretched out his hand toward the sky, and there was thick darkness in all the land of Egypt for 3 days. They did not see one another, nor did anyone rise from his place for 3 days. But all the sons of Israel had light in their dwellings. Then Pharaoh called to Moses and said, "Go, serve the Lord. Only let your flocks and your herds be detained. Even your little ones may go with you." But Moses said, "You must also let us have sacrifices and burnt offerings, that we may sacrifice them to the Lord our God. Wherefore our livestock too shall go with us, not a hoof shall be left behind. For we shall take some of them to serve the Lord our God. And until we arrive there, we ourselves do not know with what we shall serve the Lord." But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, made strong, and he was not willing to let them go. And Pharaoh said to him, "Get away from me. Beware, do not see my face again, for in the day you see my face, you shall die." And Moses said, "You are right. I shall never see your face again." So, darkness. We just went from all these signs that are causing destruction, wiping out cattle, wiping out crops. And now darkness doesn't seem to us as Westerners to be that bad. Like, okay, darkness for 3 days, it's not so bad. So why do you think this is like the second to last plague here, if we're increasing in strength? Does darkness have any significance for them? And a lack of sun, maybe?
Well, I guess we're getting the sun god. Is that their supreme god?
Mm-hmm.
And so now,
And the moon Ray.
Yeah.
So Ra, the Ray, is like their chief god. And Pharaoh himself is considered like the son of Ra. So this is like a direct attack against not only Pharaoh, but their chief god. And it had certain beliefs about the sun and whatnot, how things went, the rising of the sun, the setting of the sun. But it would be very unnerving. If your chief god was the sun god, it would be very unnerving for you not to have sun for 3 days. Very unnerving, very scary. I mean, the darkness is already scary enough. Imagine like 3 days go by and you haven't seen the sun. Like, you can't even really tell 3 days have gone by.
Mm-hmm.
That would be very, very scary. And it'd be confirmation that your chief god is defeated, really doesn't have the power and authority that you thought he had to keep the sun rising and setting, rising and setting. No sun, no crops, no sun. You can't do anything, really. I mean, it's a world of darkness. And apart from some lamps, you're not going to be able to see anything, go anywhere, do anything. Not going to be able to do any work, nothing. It says they basically stayed home, and the darkness was so strong that it could be felt. It's almost like a spiritual darkness fell on them. You can feel it. It was so intense, so terrifying, that Pharaoh is going to say go, but leave the animals. So, again, he's kind of tying them, but I think he's also thinking, well, if they do go and leave the animals, at least I'll get the benefit of that. I'll have the animals. Because we need those, because we just lost a lot of them. So I think there's kind of that aspect to it. But Moses is going to say, no, we kind of need the animals too. We're taking everything. So, it's a no-go here. We're going to come next time we get together. We'll look at the final plague, the Passover, and all that. What time we got? 8:20.
Yeah, right. That's the most consistent thing, right? No matter, I mean, even through their times, they would experience, right, some pestilence, they'd experience some droughts, they'd experience some adverse conditions in nature, but the sun is always coming up, it's always going down, it's always reliable, and now that's being shown for what it is, that Yahweh's in control of it all.
It's interesting that he said, Pharaoh said, go worship the Lord. He said the Lord, not your Lord.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe at that point, Pharaoh's starting to recognize the power there.
Yahweh, yeah, he does take the name Yahweh there. Go worship Yahweh. Yeah, I think at this point he realizes that Yahweh is a God to be feared. I'm sure he's feeling defeated at this point. We kind of look at him like he's evil and that his heart is always hard and this and that and the other thing. But honestly, look at your own heart. How many times, irregardless of consequences, like Pharaoh is facing consequences for his sin, his disobedience. Irregardless of consequences, how many times have you hardened your heart, chosen to sin? Hundreds, thousands of times where you've said to God, I think I want to do this. I mean, you knew it was wrong. You knew it was disobedience. So I don't think we should be so hard on Pharaoh and think that his heart is any different than ours. The heart of man is wicked. It is extremely fickle. It does what it wants to do. Your mind, which is your heart, is your mind. It's the seat of your emotions. It's not this blood pump here. It's your conscience. It's your ability to decide things. It's very easy to say to God, even when you know Him, yeah, I think I want to do this. It'll be okay. For different reasons we do it. One, just because we're selfish. We need that. Whatever the thing is, we want to do it. Sometimes it's, well, God will forgive me. It's a cheap grace mentality. God understands my needs. God understands why I'm doing this. Or, yeah, I've already done it 1,000 times. I can do it again. So, something to consider. But there is consequences, right? We have to live with those. We do have to live with those. There is grace, there is mercy, and God will forgive. But we definitely need to think about that as we live our lives and as we decide to whatever disobedient things that we do, whether it's lying, cheating, whatever we do, that we do a lot, or we have a tendency to do it. We really should think about that. Ask God to change our hearts.
One thing the commentary was saying is that this was the third time that, because in the third, sixth, and ninth plagues, Moses didn't go to Pharaoh and say, hey, this is going to happen. It just happened. And is there significance with that?
Say that one more time?
The third, sixth, and ninth plague,
Yeah.
or wonder,
Yep.
Moses didn't go to Pharaoh.
Yeah, the patterns. Yeah, you'll see if you break down all the plagues or all the signs, there's different patterns that occur. Yeah, there is quite a bit of patterning there that happens that we do see. And there are commentaries that do point that out. Stewart's is one of them. Yeah, there's certain things that happen at different stages, first, third, different things like that. Yeah, I think it's part of the literary patterning.
I wasn't sure if there was a significance of why that was happening, besides just the fact that,
Yeah, sometimes God tells him to go meet Pharaoh, sometimes go meet him out here, sometimes tells him go to the palace, sometimes Pharaoh calls him. There's different patterns there. Just one more comment we could make, and how we know that last sign is a raw sign. It actually says, if you look at that, it talks about the sun doesn't shine or whatever. Let's see what it says here. Moses stretched out his hand toward the sky. There was thick darkness in all the land of Egypt for 3 days. It actually says that the eye of the land is covered, something like that. That's how it's really laid out. Everywhere the eye can see, kind of thing. That whole concept of the eye of Ra, the right eye of God, of Ra, was considered the sun, was his right eye. And so it's just another thing you lose in translation, but people reading this would have seen that right away. Eye of the land, kind of thing. Alright, well, I think that's enough for this week. Go ahead and